Hello and welcome to Network West Virginia's Legally Speaking. This program is designed to educate and inform you, our local viewers, about the legal practice in our great state and how the law can affect you. Each week on Network West Virginia's Legally Speaking, we will feature some of the most progressive attorneys in the state, and you'll hear direct from them on a wide range of issues. You'll also be able to ask questions and make comments for future episodes by using the Contact Us page on networkwestvirginia.com. You can also find us on Twitter at NetworkWV. And now the host of Network West Virginia's Legally Speaking, Amy Strobel.
Good evening and welcome to Legally Speaking on Network West Virginia. I'm Amy Strobel, joined by Brent Van Deysen of the Van Deysen Law Office. And tonight, we're going to discuss planning for nursing home care for married couples. And as Brent will tell us in a moment, there is a huge difference when planning for nursing home care when the patient is married versus single. Welcome, Brent.
Hi, Amy.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
You have spent many years in your elder care law practice helping people understand the complexities of affording nursing home care. And one of the issues that comes up when clients come to you is if they're married, one spouse is going to nursing home care, one spouse is staying home. You need to afford that nursing home care while still allowing the spouse who's at home to continue to live the life they've been living. So please explain to us, how do you help people in this situation?
Sure, and Amy, we're talking about if we have a married couple, one spouse goes into the nursing home, the other spouse is staying at home, and we're looking at if the spouse in the nursing home needs to stay long-term, how do we get that individual qualified for Medicaid so that we're not draining the couple's resources at $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 a month? So the first issue is when the individual goes into the nursing home, at that particular moment, the day of admission, for Medicaid purposes, when we're doing the application, the DHHR is going to look at the assets that the nursing home resident owns. So if we have married couple and the husband's going in the nursing home, they're going to look at every asset that the husband owns. They are going to look at every asset that the husband owns with wife, and they are going to look at every asset that the wife owns by herself.
Okay.
So for Medicaid purposes, a married couple is viewed as one person to determine asset eligibility.
Okay, so a couple either goes to fill out their paperwork or comes to see you for assistance. What types of questions are they going to be asked, and what is Medicaid as the program, is the state looking at to determine that eligibility?
Sure. Medicaid is looking at, on the date of admission, what did they own? If they own property, they're going to want to know, what does the county assessor say its fair market value is? If they own an automobile, they could look either at Kelley Blue Book value online or assessor's value, for example. If it's a bank account, they're going to be looking at what was the balance as of the date of admission.
Okay.
And as we had discussed in the previous show, eligibility for Medicaid for financial asset purposes, the individual going into the nursing home can only have $2,000 worth of countable assets. When we're talking about a married couple, they view the married couple together. So could you imagine if we have the spouse going into the nursing home, if the couple had to spend their combined wealth down to $2,000 before Medicaid eligibility began, we'd be putting the spouse staying at home in the poorhouse.
Absolutely. So what do you do to help couples in that situation?
Sure. What we're doing to help folks in that situation is look at what the spending options are to become eligible. Because, you know, if we had a married couple that had $152,000 in a savings account, plus a home, plus one automobile, when the spouse goes into the nursing home, the spouse staying at home does get to keep the house and the automobile. Medicaid does not value those two assets. They are excluded. But it's the money that's the issue.
Okay.
So if we have countable assets in the form of money, for example, and we have the spouse going into the nursing home, the spouse at home gets to keep a minimum of $23,000 in countable assets, up to a maximum of $115,000 in countable assets. And the amount that the spouse actually gets to keep depends on how much they had as of the date that the other spouse went into the nursing home.
Well, okay, I would like to keep the $115,000. So, and I think it's a scary prospect. You know, you're going through the emotional feelings of sending your spouse to nursing care, and now you've got to worry about how you're going to live. I mean, let's say you're 70. Some people live to 90 or older. How do you make sure that your client keeps as much of that money as possible?
Well, this is where a consultation with us right at the beginning of a nursing home admission is very helpful. Because if you can imagine, if we had a couple that had, say, $150,000 in money in the bank, and they went along, you know, 8, 9, 10 months, you would have spent anywhere from $8,000 to $10,000 a month. Yeah. You could see that would dwindle quite quickly.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But the way the Medicaid rules work, the minimum amount of assets, if the countable assets are $23,000 or less, then when the one spouse goes into the nursing home, the spouse at home can then basically keep everything. So if our married couple has a home, one automobile, and remember the value is ignored, and then let's say they have $10,000 in a checking account and a second automobile worth $10,000. When the spouse goes into the nursing home, the other spouse staying at home can keep the $10,000 in the checking account and keep the second automobile that's valued at $10,000, because those two things are valued at under $23,000.
Okay.
Plus the spouse at home also got to keep the home and the first automobile, which its value is ignored. So pretty good scenario right there. But then if their countable assets are more, if they're $230,000 or greater, then the maximum the spouse at home gets to keep is $115,000. So if the married couple had $400,000 in a savings account and the husband goes into the nursing home, the wife would have to spend $285,000 before her husband could become eligible for Medicaid. Then, if we have a scenario where the countable assets are greater than $23,000 but are less than $230,000, then the Medicaid program splits the baby. Half that the spouse at home gets to keep, half that the spouse would have to spend before we could get Medicaid eligible.
All right, now I asked you this in our last show, but is this something you want to talk to an attorney about the day your spouse goes to nursing home care, or do you want to talk to an attorney months or years before that happens?
Ideally, the best planning occurs when somebody's able to do their planning at least 5 years before a need for Medicaid is required. The reason why that's important, because for people in good health today, I would expect that over time the Medicaid laws are going to change to where we don't have the favorable provisions that allow me to help clients lawfully. Okay. So right now, today, if we have a married couple with one going into the nursing home and one staying at home, it's all about how can you best spend your assets to help the spouse at home. Most people who are uninformed simply just pay the monthly nursing home bill until the money is gone, and see, to become eligible, the spouse has to spend down a portion of the assets, but not spending it at the nursing home. So there are other ways that somebody could become eligible.
Okay, and let me ask you quickly before we go to break. Does it make sense, in this scenario in the beginning we talk about you have things in the husband's name, things that are jointly owned, things in the wife's name. Does that make sense to plan your financial future that way? Should you have things split up like that, or does it matter? For
Medicaid purposes, when we have a married couple and one goes into the nursing home, it doesn't matter whose name the assets are in.
Okay.
Because they look at things in your name, things in your spouse's name, to determine eligibility.
Okay. We're going to talk more about affording nursing home care as soon as we come back. Stay with us. Welcome back to Legally Speaking on Network West Virginia. Brent Van Deysen and I are talking about nursing home care for married couples tonight. And Brent, we're talking a lot about how Medicare and Medicaid can kick in and help married couples when one of the spouses is going into care. So we're talking about one person's at home, one person is needing long-term care. Talk to us a little bit more about how the spouse that's at home can spend down, we keep coming back to that term, so that they can become eligible for Medicaid.
Yes, and basically, as we mentioned before the break, I outlined the scenarios of the amount of countable assets that the spouse at home could keep. Again, if their countable assets are less than $23,000, they can keep that amount. If their countable assets are greater than $230,000, they could keep a maximum of $115,000. But if they fall in between, then basically the spouse at home gets to keep about half. And remember, we're talking about how to qualify for Medicaid by identifying the amount of assets that have to be spent down. So when we have this scenario, it's best to make it a little bit more real. So let's say we've got husband and wife. The wife is 73 years old. She's in great health. Her mother and her aunt have lived into their late 90s. She thinks she's going to live into her late 90s too. But her husband is bedridden because of Parkinson's disease, and she finally gets to the point where she can't take care of him anymore, admits him to a nursing home.
Okay.
So on the day of admission, this married couple had a home, nice household furnishings, one 3-year-old Buick automobile, and they had $152,000 in a savings account at the local bank. So what the Medicaid program does is it looks, as of the day of admission, what did they have and the values. So then for Medicaid purposes, the husband going into the nursing home, he can have $2,000 worth of countable assets. So he can keep $2,000.
Okay, that's not a lot compared to what you've just described that they own.
That's correct.
Okay.
But the spouse at home gets to keep the house, the automobile, the household furnishings, but it's the money that's at issue. $115,000 remains. So for the husband to become eligible for Medicaid, what they're going to do is they're going to split the baby. Half, $75,000, that gets set aside for the spouse at home, and then the husband can qualify for Medicaid after the spouse at home has spent $75,000.
All right. How is she or he going to spend that money? What is the smartest way to spend that money?
Sure. And in our example, we've got husband in the nursing home, wife at home. Obviously, it doesn't matter who goes in.
Sure.
Okay. So many people who are not well informed, if your husband's not eligible for Medicaid, you're going to get a monthly bill from the nursing home. $7,500, $8,500, $9,500 a month.
Yeah.
And many people will just spend their money in savings, like in this example, you know, the wife could just simply spend $7,500 a month paying the nursing home bill if that's how much they charge, and at the end of 10 months, she has spent half of her life savings.
Yeah.
Beginning month number 11, then Medicaid would pick up and pay her husband's nursing home bill, but that's not a wise way to approach this.
Well, especially when we say she thinks she may have 20 years left to live.
Exactly. So spending is what you have to do with the excess assets. Spending on nursing home care is not required. So what are some other ways that we might be able to spend this money that's going to benefit the spouse staying at home? Here's one example, and let's change the fact pattern a little bit. Even though this married couple has $152,000 in savings, let's assume they owe a mortgage of $75,000 against their home. After the husband goes into the nursing home, now is when we have to spend $75,000. So the next day, the wife can pull $75,000 out of savings, go pay off that $75,000 mortgage, and now the husband can become Medicaid eligible. She spent $75,000. She still has $75,000 in savings, but this is a better result, paying off this mortgage and being able to go forward with her life debt-free, as opposed to having the mortgage and having spent half of her life savings unnecessarily paying for nursing home care.
So if someone isn't making smart decisions, or frankly just doesn't know that there are other options out there, they're really risking their financial future.
Absolutely, especially where the spouse remaining at home is maybe younger or healthier or has longevity in their family, absolutely. Having me involved from the beginning in a case like this can make an exceptional and extreme difference. So here are some other ideas, because with the spouse, with the husband going into the nursing home, and in our example, if our married couple, like most of my clients, don't have a mortgage on their home, you know, they pay cash for everything, so there's no $75,000 debt to go pay off. What are some other options? Well, remember, the wife in this case gets to keep the house, and its value is ignored as long as it's worth $500,000 or less. That's not an issue in our state for the most part. So she could spend money fixing up her home. So if she has to spend $75,000, she could make repairs to the home. She could, you know, remodel the kitchen, new furnace and windows. Can she buy
furnishings, or does it need to be something necessary to the home?
She could also buy furnishings, because whatever furnishings you own, those are ignored for Medicaid purposes. Now, spending $75,000 on home improvements real fast, usually not workable, because of the large-scale nature of that and how long it would take, and for each month that goes by that it's not done, she's having to pay the nursing home bill. But if the fact pattern was a little bit different, if she only needed to spend $10,000, and if the floor coverings and appliances were worn out, that's easy. Getting those done real quick. Like you said, furnishings. If their furnishings are in, you know, are completely worn out, she could spend some money getting new furnishings for the home. If her car was worn out, you can have one automobile and they ignore the value. So, you know, in this case, I mean, the individual has to spend $75,000 before her spouse can get eligible. Even though she could go spend $75,000 and buy and trade in her existing car, she won't want to do that. That's just not prudent. But if she only had to spend, say, $20,000, she could trade in that older car and maybe buy a new car or a good used one. And if you've spent the money that you need to spend, like if in our example here, if the married couple only needed to spend $20,000, the husband goes into the nursing home the next day, the wife trades in their only car on a new car and has spent $20,000,
they're done.
They're done. They haven't had to spend, you know, $8,000, $9,000 a month at a nursing home and can get the husband eligible for Medicaid. But the spending has to occur after the husband goes into the nursing home, which can really, I mean, could you imagine putting your spouse into a nursing home and then going out and, I don't know, buying a new car or remodeling your home? Those are some tough things.
It's tough, but it sounds like it's better than just writing a check every month and losing that money. And again, I keep saying to you, this is such an emotional time in someone's life, and they have to make these tough decisions. So hopefully they have someone to guide them through it. We're going to go ahead and take a break, but when we come back, we actually have a viewer question that deals with this exact topic, so stay with us. Welcome back to Legally Speaking. Brent Van Deysen and I are discussing nursing care home for married couples tonight, and we're really fortunate that one of our viewer questions that came in from our last show deals with this exact topic. So Brent, this is from Amy in Charleston. She writes, I just put my husband in the nursing home. It costs $9,000 per month, and we have $60,000 in savings. How can I get him eligible for Medicaid without losing everything? And I bet that's a common question.
It's a very common question. You know, in our law practice, we deal exclusively with elder law issues, helping people apply for Medicaid. And this is a very common question that we have for married couples. Okay, so in this example, she just put her husband into the nursing home. And
$9,000 per month.
$9,000 per month, and there's $60,000 in savings. Okay, so with that, Amy, some things to consider. How are you going to spend the portion of assets that you need to spend? Because with $60,000 in savings, I'm going to assume that you own a house. I'm going to assume that you own just one automobile and that you have household furnishings in addition to have $60,000 in the savings account. So, Amy, you get to keep the house, the vehicle, in the household furnishings, and then the $60,000, what happens there, Amy? You get to keep $30,000 of that. Your husband will become eligible for Medicaid after you spend $30,000. So Amy, how you spend this $30,000 becomes very important, because if you do nothing other than pay the nursing home bill each month at $9,000 a month, after 3 months, you're going to have lost half of your life savings. So how you go about spending that money then becomes very important.
Is this, when we talk about $60,000 in savings, do you find that as an average number of what people come to you with, or is it higher, is it lower? I
mean, certainly it might be all over the board. The majority of the citizens in West Virginia that I'm serving tend to have blue-collar backgrounds, have worked in coal mines, chemical plants, maybe even some educators. I would say, in addition to home ownership, $60,000 is a pretty common number. Okay. I would rarely ever see a client with probably more than $500,000 of assets saved. But in this case, Amy, to become eligible for Medicaid, how you go about spending this $30,000 is going to be important. Now, as I mentioned in the last segment, Amy has some options here. She can spend that $30,000 to do a number of things. For example, she might prepay her husband's and her funeral and burial arrangements. So if she goes down to a local funeral home, picks out the goods and services, both for her and her spouse, have the funeral director write up the agreement that lists what they'll be buying, and then that agreement also includes provisions for its irrevocability. And what I mean by that is, it's set up to where once she funds it, she can't cancel it and get the money back. Okay. So if the funeral costs, in this case, $20,000 for both her and her spouse, she can then take $20,000 of what needs to be spent and prepay that funeral and burial.
And she's 2/3 of the way there then.
She's 2/3 of the way there. Now, she might have already spent $9,000 at the nursing home. I don't know.
Okay.
If she has, now she's there. But maybe her husband's initially eligible for Medicare and she hasn't spent anything yet, which is why it's really good to come to me, because instead of spending, the remaining $9,000 or $10,000 at the nursing home, maybe she needs new floor coverings and appliances for her home. Maybe the one car that her and her husband owns is worn out. She could trade it in, maybe get a good used car, or if she has enough trade-in value, maybe walk away with a new car. She could buy furnishings for her house, for example. So there are other options than just simply spending all of the money at the nursing home until it's gone.
And I want to emphasize, because I'm guessing I'm right here, whether you have $10,000 or $500,000, it's still smart to go to an attorney. You don't ever want to think to yourself, gee, I don't have enough. I don't have enough to protect. There's always a way to help people.
Right. And specifically an attorney specializing in elder law,
yeah.
We're going to have the expertise necessary. There's even another option. If Amy had $30,000 to spend, but she didn't need to fix up her house, buy a new car, or prepay funeral and burial, after her husband goes into the nursing home, she can actually spend that $30,000 to buy a Medicaid-compliant annuity for herself.
Wow. Okay. And this is why you need to really sit down one-on-one with you, because I love that we get questions and that we can answer them, because we all need that general advice to get us started. But really, it's even just with this information, it sounds like you even have more questions about Amy's situation.
I really do. I would certainly have more questions, because for herself, if spending in this manner wasn't an option, we could take the $30,000. She could purchase an annuity that's then going to make payments to her.
Okay.
With that $30,000. So she would wind up being able to keep $30,000 and then being able to get back the other $30,000 in a payment stream over a period of time, instead of just simply having to spend it at a nursing home. Well, that's an amazing.
You make that sound very easy.
I try to boil it down as simple as I can, but but that's something that's obviously much more difficult to accomplish.
Well, great. And this is why we love getting your questions here at the station, and we really appreciate you, Brent, taking the time to answer them, and we hope you keep them coming. And as always, you can also contact Brent at his office, check out his website, and as always, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, Amy.
And of course, we hope to see you on future shows. Good night.
You have been watching Network West Virginia's Legally Speaking. The views expressed on this show are that of our guest attorney and not the host, sponsors, or advertisers, and should not be considered as personal legal advice. If you have a specific legal issue, please speak with an attorney in person. For more information on schedules, appearing on, or sponsoring this or any Network West Virginia show, please use the Contact Us page on networkwestvirginia.com.
It starts with something little, like taking a first step, and then another, and another. And if you do it, and your friends do it, and their friends do it, soon we'll be walking our way to awareness, support, and an end to Alzheimer's disease. And that would be big.
Grab your friends and family and start a team today. Register at alz.org.